We buy a ton of pre-owned record collections. And as you can imagine, classic rock from the 60s and 70s are some of the most common albums we see, as that was the heyday of people buying and listening to records. There are a handful of albums that were staples during that era. We're going to talk to you about 10 essential classic rock albums that are found in almost every collection we buy on this episode, Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local, but you are in the U.S., you can shop with us anytime at ntxvinyl.com, and would love it if you'd subscribe to our channel on YouTube here and follow us across social media at NTX Vinyl is the handle on Facebook and Instagram. Let's talk about essentials. Let's talk about the most common albums we see all the time. Now, don't get me wrong, just because an album is common doesn't mean that it's not fantastic. And I think these are 10 perfect examples. I see these in almost every collection we purchase. Now, grain of salt, not every, but almost every. Like if I'm just buying, 30, 40 records off someone, maybe these aren't included. But any significant collection that I'm purchasing, it's got these in it. I see them over and over. And I don't mind because these records sell. They always do. They always will because they're essentials, because they're classics. Let's get to the list. All right, when you're going to talk about common albums, the first one I think of is right here. This is a classic. If you don't know this album, you need to fix that. It is completely common. You can find a great copy of this at just about any record store, a lot of garage sales, a lot of antique malls. $5, $10 for a clean copy. You might even find it in the dollar bin. Tapestry by Carole King. It's essentially a greatest hits. I mean, this is stacked front to back. I Feel the Earth Move. So Far Away. It's Too Late. Home Again. Beautiful. Way Over Yonder. You've Got a Friend. Where You Lead. Man, every single, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, just so good. I hate it when people overlook records like this because it's a cover that you see a ton. It's a record you see a ton. Again, it might be in the bargain bin. That doesn't mean it's not a great album. It is a huge selling album from its era, which is why it's in every collection, which is the same thing could be said about all these albums I'm about to show you. But this is the number one I think of in the classic rock genre. I think it's very underrated only because it just gets overlooked, again, because it is so common. But don't let that deter you. If you don't know the greatness of Carole King and Tapestry, please check it out because it's a fantastic record. Next on the list, another huge seller. Actually, one of two albums on this, which are not actually albums, they're greatest hits, but man, it's pretty rare to find a big record collection that has anything 60s, 70s in it, classic rock, and not have a copy of a greatest hits by the Eagles. This is one of the greatest selling records of all time. Take It Easy, Witchy Woman, Lion Eyes, Already Gone, Desperado, One of These Nights, Tequila Sunrise, Take It to the Limit, Peaceful, Easy Feeling, and Best of My Love. It is a true greatest hits. I'm not even the biggest Eagles fan, honestly. I totally appreciate them, especially their earlier work. But you can't deny the hits on this album. It's a massively popular record, and again, one of the best-selling albums of all time. So it makes sense that this would be in just about every collection because everyone picked it up back in the day. You can see this has still got a $6.88 price tag on it. You can definitely pick this up. Kind of similar to Tapestry. You might find it in a bargain bin, but easily $5, $10 to get you a really nice copy of this. If it's sealed or like this one's still in shrink wrap, maybe it'll cost you a little bit more, 10, 12 bucks. But all in all, pretty much an essential for any classic rock collection, in my opinion. I could have grabbed a couple albums from this band, but I will go with 4 because, again, you see it very, very often. When you got songs like Stairway to Heaven and Rock and Roll, Misty Mountain Hop, Four Sticks, Going to California, Black Dog. I mean, again, essential album. From Zeppelin, I would say it's between this one and Led Zeppelin 2 are probably the albums I see the most. I mean, I see 1, 3, Physical Graffiti. I see the whole catalog. But as far as ones that I see the most, I would say this one and Led Zeppelin 2 are probably neck and neck. This is another one where maybe slightly more expensive, maybe 15 to $20 for a really clean vintage copy. That's not a bad price at all. You might be able to find it cheaper. Or again, you find it at a garage sale for a couple bucks or in a bargain bin a little beat up. But definitely an essential album from Zeppelin. Not even my favorite Zeppelin, but certainly iconic and certainly a must own for any classic rock fan. This next one is a no-brainer. If you're going to have a classic rock collection from the 60s and 70s, it's going to have a copy of Rumors in it. I see it all the time. I still love finding them. All of these albums are definitely common. They're not rare. They're not necessarily expensive, but they're fantastic albums, and none more than this. I mean, Rumors, what needs to be said? You're never going to find an album that contains more drama, that contains more combative songwriting, which is just incredible. But it's a gem. It really is. I don't care. Early pressings of this, you can find them. Some of them have kind of a textured cover, come with an insert. You find one in shrink wrap. Again, it's a great $10, $15 album, vintage pressing. On the higher end, maybe 20 bucks if it's sealed or in shrink. But yeah, you shouldn't have any problem picking this up because it was so popular, still is, still sells great. All these albums do. That's the thing. It's like you put these out in a record shop at a decent price and they'll still sell all day long because there's so many collectors who are just now getting into the hobby, which is amazing to see. And they see, a vintage, really clean copy of Rumors, and that's a great pickup for 10, 12, 15 bucks. So don't discount it if you don't have it in your collection. Absolutely fabulous album, and again, another must own. If you're going to talk about great singer-songwriters, great supergroups, how about the debut from CSN? This is just a beautiful, beautiful record. It's very common. Not one that you see in great condition a lot, which I think speaks to how much people played this album. And again, that can be said for a lot of these, but beautiful record, very common, huge seller, and obviously was a conglomeration of members from other bands. So again, I mentioned Supergroup, and then of course they add Neil Young to the mix by the time they get to the next record. So absolutely beautiful record, front to back. One of the first performances ever was at Woodstock. I mean, it's just an iconic album in every way, shape, or form. One of the best supergroups ever, and you take them each individually, all great performers, great songwriters, great harmonies through and through, and a really, really beautiful record. Another one I see a ton of, could have picked a few from this catalog as well, but I'm going to go with Green River from CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I see a lot of their albums. They were hugely popular in their heyday in the mid-60s going into early 70s. Green River, Commotion, Tombstone Shadow, Wrote a Song for Everyone, Bad Moon Rising, just a ton of huge songs on this one. I love the swampiness of it. I love finding these in great condition. This is another band, for some reason, I find their records all the time and they're typically really beat up, just like I was saying about CSN. So people really played these albums. Very common though. There's no reason you should have to pay more than 10 or 12 bucks for a really nice copy of a CCR record like Green River. That can be said for most of their early catalog. All single LPs, all pretty accessible, and make great staples to just about every classic rock collection that we see, which is why this was a perfect fit for this video. I mentioned there was more than one greatest hits. The other greatest hits, which I think along with the Eagles you see a ton of, and that is Dylan's greatest hits. This is a very iconic album. This is a really nice copy in shrink wrap with the sticker. You see the original price of $3.97, regularly $5.97, but very common. Rainy Day Woman, Blowing in the Wind, Times a Changin', Like a Rolling Stone, Mr. Tambourine Man, Subterranean Homesick Blues, Just Like a Woman. So great track list, classic album. See it very, very often. If you find a version that has the poster in it, you'll probably pay a little bit more, maybe 20, 25 bucks on the high end for a super clean copy. But again, there's no reason you can't find a great copy of this for 8, 10 bucks, 12 bucks at your local record store. It's in every collection. There's no reason it should cost more than that because, again, you see it over and over. I see this album. I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times. I've bought it hundreds of times. I've sold it hundreds of times. And I love finding it, especially in really great shape. Again, all these records, the same deal. Like these 60s, 70s classics. Like I love finding a rarity, but I also love finding albums like these just in really great condition because they're great to be able to pass along to new collectors who are looking to fill out with some of these essentials. There's only 2 left on the list. Of course, you're going to have a Beatles album. I get calls on a daily basis about people who've got collections and they've got Beatles records. They've either got Beatles or they've got Elvis. I could have included some Elvis in this, but I don't really consider Elvis classic rock when this was going to be all classic rock. So, but they're in every collection as they should be. One, greatest selling artists of all time. So even though you've got Beatles records, that doesn't mean you're sitting on a gold mine. Abbey Road is a great example. You see it in every collection. You also see a lot of other Beatles albums in every collection because they were made by the millions and still are, and there's a reason for that. It's the greatest band of all time, in my opinion. Abbey Road is an essential. It's very common. Clean copy of this shouldn't cost you more than 12, 15, maybe 20 on the high end, and that's a super clean copy. This one, like this one, that's still in shrink wrap. There are some anomalies to this album in regards to finding a first pressing, whether or not it has Her Majesty on the back, whether or not it has this little storm drain, some kind of Easter eggs in regards to determining what pressing you have, but certainly an iconic album cover, one of the most iconic ever. Maybe the only one that would eclipse this would be the next record on the list. Last but not least, you're going to talk about albums found in just about every record collection. You're going to go with the most iconic album cover of all time and one of the most iconic albums of all time, Dark Side of the Moon. Love seeing this one in great condition with the black cover. A lot of times you get a lot of ring wear. Any album cover that's got a ton of black or a ton of white, you usually see it pretty beat up. This one's a good example of that. So to find a really nice copy of Dark Side of the Moon, early US pressing, $20, $25. If it's got the posters and the stickers and things like that and the extras. If it doesn't have posters and stickers, you can usually find a pretty decent copy for 15 to 20. Really just depends on your record store and how they price records. But typically a nice copy of this one in any of my shops will run around 20 bucks. Again, if it's got the posters and stickers, it's going to go up a little bit from there, maybe 25, 30. And it all depends on condition. But, I don't need to tell you anything about Dark Side of the Moon in regards to how important it is, but it's not even my favorite Pink Floyd record, but it is just so iconic and so essential and very, very common. Again, another one of those where I'll get people contact me and say, "Oh, I've got Dark Side of the Moon in this collection, though, so just beware that it's got some heat." And I'm like, that's cool. It's in every collection. It was one of the best-selling albums of all time, just like Abbey Road, and just like Dylan's Greatest Hits, and just like CSN. All these albums, multi-millions of them pressed and sold. They're in every collection, so you shouldn't be paying an arm and a leg for these albums. They're all very common. They're all great albums, this one included. And I would encourage anyone, if you're missing any of these on your list, to add them to your list, because definitely worth having in your collection. There you go, 10 essential classic rock albums we find in just about every collection. There's another 100 behind this, honestly. There are so many records that came out in the 60s and the 70s that were pressed, even going into the 80s, of course, that were pressed in such large quantities. And when vinyl was not only the primary, but the dominant format that people were buying and listening to music on, it makes sense that so many of these albums are still out there. So I love seeing, I love the classics, especially in great condition. I've said that a bunch of times because unfortunately, all too often you see them and they're just beat to hell. But again, people were playing their records, they were transporting their records, they were taking them around. So I understand that. But love finding these types of albums and all of the others in a similar vein. And for me, when I got into records, kind of my first goal was to check a lot of these essentials off the list. So if you don't have these 10 checked off your list, don't spend a fortune on them. They're common records. You should be able to find them in pretty good condition, and they shouldn't cost you an arm and a leg. Tell me this: what are the other albums that should be added to this list? I'm sure you've got an opinion on what should be in that top 10 of essential classic albums that are super common and found in every collection. So let me know in the comments. Appreciate it as always. My name is G.I. Sanders, and this has been another episode of Talking About Records.